shot for right now. Welcome back. Let's get right to it. Animal rights, non-human rights now. That's what this film is about. You know these players. They have names. They have extensive resumes. D.A. Pennebaker, Chris Hegedus have made a film about the rights of those who need representation. Stephen Wise is that person. They thought long and hard about making a courtroom drama, but in some ways that's exactly what this film is, although it's so much more than that inexpensive, dramatic phrase. That being said, I'm very pleased to welcome to the stage these three players for an important film that will take this conversation to the next level that was started with The Cove, of course, the Oscar winner, and we continue on into Unlocking the Cage. Good morning, all. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning.
Good morning. Very much appreciate it.
Okay.
Happy to be here.
Chris, if you would, talk a little bit about, in doing some reading, you and D.A., thinking about this process of what a film shoot looks like, a documentary shoot looks like, when the times are stretched out by virtue of the way that the courts move.
Well, doing this film was a long process because it's a legal story, but we were very fortunate that, one of the things we look for in documentaries is kind of dropping into a world that we know nothing about, and we really did that in this film with Steve. But one of the great things was that Steve was just about to begin to do his work, kind of his life's dream, which is to go into a court and argue that an animal has the capacity to be a legal person. And so we were there from the beginning, which was a long journey.
Years back.
It took us about 4 years, but it was fascinating.
That being said, and as we refer to 4 years as a long time, you made a comment in an interview that was compelling to me that, Stephen, you've been thinking about this issue for 30 years. Talk about how it feels to be here in 2016 with this film when, as you said initially, you were ridiculed, you weren't taken seriously. The world has changed, and yet you're still working.
Indeed, it was in 1985 when I thought that I wanted to do this, and I thought it would take at that time until 2015, which seemed like impossibly long, 30 years, for me to be able, and others, to develop the legal theories, wait for the scientists to discover more about the minds of animals, and probably, most importantly, wait for the world to turn and catch up with us so that it would be receptive to the ideas that we were pushing forward in a courtroom, and that we had some reasonable chance of success. And so now, all that is happening, and it's extraordinary to me. It's hard for me to believe that that's something I was thinking of, when my hair was deep brown, it comes to fruition when it's silver.
It occurred to me last night while I was doing some homework, laying in bed, preparing for this interview, and I had my little rescue dog, Mr. Buddy, laying next to me, and I was thinking about how deeply I feel for this animal that doesn't have sign language of a chimpanzee or those kinds of higher level skills, and yet you use the word incredulous. It made me a little incredulous in that moment that in some ways the argument that you're making and the cause that you're promoting, like, how could it possibly be so difficult for us to understand what it is that you're saying and to protect those who can't speak, our animal brethren and sisterin?
It's because the law of 2016 in that respect is the same as the law of zero. I mean, for 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, the law has treated all non-human animal as things that are our slaves, that are put in the world, for us to do whatever we want to them. And those kinds of ideas really take a long time to die. And one of the things that's helping us is there's so many scientists who are showing us what extraordinarily cognitively complex beings, what wonderfully emotional beings. And dogs are particularly interesting because they were even put at a lower level than, for example, sheep or cows, because they had no economic value. They were seen as frivolous beings. So they weren't actually even property until the late 1800s. We hope we're on the way someday to having dogs being persons who have certain rights as well. Your dog and my dog, they don't have anything to worry about.
Right.
But there are millions and millions of dogs out there who are also, quite amazing creatures who have a lot to worry about, and they deserve the protection that only legal rights can give.
Mr. Pennebaker, welcome.
Yes.
Nice to have you here as well this morning.
It's very nice to see you. I can look out your window and see huge mountains full of snow. Reminds me of my youth when I used to ski on snow. Now I just look at it.
Talk about, once you made the decision to get in and to stay with it, were there times, I'm sure there were difficulties, and even just probably the emotional inconvenience of having to wait when you want to move forward with the narrative? Were there moments of doubt that maybe we can't tell this story?
Well, I mean, one of the things in the process of making this film is Steve had to find the plaintiffs. He had to find the animal that he wanted to argue for in court. And, through a process, he decided it would be a chimpanzee. And through another long process, he decided that the best state to argue a case in would be New York State. And so we set about trying to find chimpanzees in New York. And actually, the first 2 chimpanzee plaintiffs that we found just 2 months before we were going to mount the case, first one died, and then the other one died. And so, the whole, case kind of came to a standstill, and we had to go find some other chimpanzees in New York. And New York is not a state that has a lot of chimpanzees. It's not like some other warmer climates in the United States. So it was a challenge, and a lot of these animals are almost hidden. Like, the first plaintiff in the case was a chimpanzee named Tommy, who we found kind of in the back big garage shed of a place in upstate New York that rented trailers. And they also had reindeers that they rented.
Right.
But they had this, one chimpanzee, Tommy, alone there. So he became the first plaintiff in the case. And then eventually we also found another chimpanzee that we knew about that was deaf and had been in showbiz. And then 2 chimpanzees that were being used in medical research for locomotion that were at the State University of New York, which for us ended up quite interesting because it's a state university, so that brought in the Attorney General
Of New York.
New York.
If I may say as well that most people, when they think about courtrooms and law, they're used to seeing what they see on TV and movies, and they think something happens, and then bang, it's over. And as Chris and Penny learned, what we were doing was a long-term strategy where we might lose a case, but inside of that, we won certain things within the case that then we could build on for the next case. We might lose that one too, but we've then added on, and we've won certain things there until finally we hope it all comes together. And I said, I wonder how they're going to portray that. That losses are not necessarily losses. They're just
yes,
losses.
the war, not the battle.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, I see you in a rocker somehow hundreds of years from now, and you'll get the word, hey, we just decided it's a person.
It's not going to be hundreds of years. It's going to be soon.
Steve, it seems self-evident to me that you would have been philosophically excited and in concert with your filmmaker partners from the beginning, but were there some aspects of the logistics of being in front of a camera and having a film crew, and I don't want to say following you around, maybe that's not the right characterization, I wasn't there, but just the idea that you're part of a bigger machine in a way than what you would typically do with your day, with your practice.
Well, we didn't see any downside at all, and in fact, we began to kid each other within the Non-Human Rights Project that if they weren't filming, then nothing important was really happening. Kind of switched.
I got to do something worth being filmed.
If they're not interested, then what are we doing here?
It was a pretty small film crew. A lot of times it was just me.
Right.
But,
and talk about the feeling that you have as you're here with this film at the festival. getting ready to share it with the world. And I mentioned The Cove, but of course also Blackfish and the staggering impact that that film appearing on CNN had on me, just the same literally as millions of other people. Talk about your fondest expectations for this film, because I have a sense of anticipation for people being ready.
Well, for me, it's futuristic. And I felt that from the very beginning, that we weren't just making a film about a lawyer whose love of animals had figured out a way to deal with them which nobody had come up with before. What I see is, in the next 40 or 50 years, whatever, our relationship with animals is going to change a lot, because we're going to stop eating them. It's just too expensive.
And the technology is there
yeah,
for
and we'll be eating
replacements
artificial duck and artificial steaks and whatnot, and people will get used to it and won't think anything about it. But I think our curiosity, which is probably of all the creatures on Earth, maybe show the most curiosity when it benefits us. I think we're going to start kind of coming to terms with our fellow citizens of the Earth and animals, and what's going on in their heads and what they know, because I'm sure they know things that we need to know and have no idea about.
Absolutely.
And I indeed do see, since I began in 1985, the tides of history have shifted, and they are dramatically more in our favor. And I think at one point in the film, I look up and say, somehow when we weren't looking, we became the mainstream. And we are indeed
and the transition continues.
It does, and we feel we're moving, very fast, and there are going to be all kinds of rear guard actions against us, but they're going to fail.
But they're going to fail.
Yeah.
My friends, I'm enthralled at the ideas of this film. I'm grateful to have you here. I wish we could continue to talk. However, we must go. I know you all have a busy schedule. Thank you for making time for Park City Television. Best wishes for what I am certain will be a tremendous success for this film. It's great to meet you. Best wishes.
Thank you for your interest.
Thank you so much.
It's good. We really like that.
All right, friends. We have to get out of here, because that is all the time we have for the live program. We will continue recording interviews for your enjoyment, and of course we will be back again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with another edition of In the Can. Thank you very much for joining us. We will see you soon.